God is about to put your name on a blessing you didn't pay for. There is a quiet truth most people spend their lives overlooking, not because it is hidden, but because it refuses to shout. It is this: not every blessing arrives as a wage, not every gift comes as a transaction, and not every turning point is something you can trace back to effort alone. Some of the most decisive moments in a human life arrive unannounced, unearned by any visible scale, and yet perfectly timed. They feel almost unreasonable. You look at your hands and realize you are holding something you did not build, did not bargain for, did not even imagine you were eligible to receive. And that is precisely how grace often moves, quietly, deliberately, and with a logic that refuses to bow to human accounting. Many of us were taught, explicitly or implicitly, that life is a ledger. You put in the work, you earn the reward. You fall short, you suffer the loss. And while discipline and responsibility matter deeply, this belief, when taken as absolute, leaves no room for mystery, no space for mercy, no allowance for a God who acts beyond contracts. It conditions the soul to believe that if it has failed, struggled, delayed, or wandered, then it must forever remain disqualified. Yet the story of human transformation has never been written solely by effort. It has always been punctuated by moments where God intervenes not because we deserve it, but because He is who He is. There comes a season when striving exhausts you, not the healthy striving of growth, but the desperate kind, the kind that feels like pushing a locked door with bleeding hands, convinced that if you just push harder, it must eventually open. In that season, you begin to confuse effort with worth. You start to believe that rest is laziness, waiting is weakness, and stillness is failure. But what if that season was never meant to reward your strength? What if it was meant to empty you of the illusion that you control the outcome? God does not ignore effort, but He is not limited by it either. He sees the long nights no one applauded, the choices that cost you comfort, the integrity that went unrewarded, the prayers that felt like they dissolved into silence. He sees them, yet there are times when He allows you to reach the end of your own resources so that you can finally recognize the beginning of His. For a soul intoxicated by self-sufficiency cannot easily receive a gift. It keeps trying to pay for what was meant to be freely given. There is a peculiar resistance in the human heart when grace approaches. We prefer rewards we can explain. We want blessings that make sense, that can be traced back to our resumes, our sacrifices, our credentials. An unearned blessing unsettles us. It threatens our carefully constructed narratives of control. It whispers that perhaps we are not as self-made as we thought, and that truth, though freeing, can feel humiliating before it feels holy. But listen closely. God is not preparing to bless you because you finally performed well enough. He is preparing to bless you because the time has come, because your character has been shaped in hidden places, because humility has replaced entitlement, because patience has grown where urgency once ruled, because you have learned, slowly and painfully, that your life is not a project you manage, but a call you steward. When God puts your name on a blessing you did not pay for, it will not flatter your ego, it will quiet it. You will not feel taller, you will feel smaller, and in that smallness, strangely safe. Gratitude will replace pride. Responsibility will replace celebration. For gifts from God are never light. They carry weight. They ask something of the receiver. They demand wisdom, restraint, and reverence. They require a soul that understands that favor is not permission to relax morally, but a summons to live more carefully than before. You may wonder why it took so long, why the doors remained closed when you were ready, why others seemed to pass you by effortlessly, why your prayers echoed unanswered, why your faith was tested in slow, grinding ways. But delay is not denial, and silence is not absence. Often, what feels like God withholding is God preparing. A blessing received too early can destroy the very person it was meant to elevate. Timing is not cruelty, it is kindness disguised as restraint. Think of how easily success can harden a heart that has not yet learned compassion. Think of how quickly power can corrupt a spirit that has not yet learned surrender. Think of how prosperity can dull the conscience of one who has not yet learned dependence. God, in His mercy, refuses to place weight on shoulders that have not yet been strengthened by waiting. And so He allows seasons of obscurity, of frustration, of slow growth, not to punish, but to protect. When the blessing comes, It may not arrive in the form you expected. God is not obligated to fulfill your imagination. He is committed to fulfilling your purpose. What you call a breakthrough may look, at first, like an interruption. What you call success may feel like responsibility. What you call answered prayer may require you to let go of something you thought you needed. God's gifts often arrive disguised as new demands on your character. There is also this: God's unearned blessings expose the poverty of comparison. When you realize that what you have received was not a competition prize, envy loses its grip. You stop measuring your life against others because you understand that grace does not follow ladders. It follows callings. The path God chooses for you cannot be borrowed, copied, or rushed. It unfolds according to a wisdom that sees far beyond the present moment. Somewhere deep inside, you already sense that something is shift. Not because circumstances have changed yet, but because your posture has. You are less frantic, less eager to prove, less obsessed with outcome. You have learned to wait without quitting and to work without worshipping the work itself. This inner alignment often precedes outer change. God rarely rearranges the landscape of a life before he reorders the heart that must walk through it. The blessing that is coming will not announce itself with noise. It will arrive quietly, almost modestly, as if testing whether you recognize it. It may come through an opportunity you did not chase, a door you did not knock on, a favor you did not request. And when you realize it bears your name, there will be a moment of holy confusion. You will ask yourself why. Why you? Why now? Why this way? That question is not doubt, it is reverence. It is the soul bowing before mystery. And in that moment, you will understand something essential. God is not rewarding your perfection. He is honoring your perseverance. He is not endorsing your past. He is investing in your future. He is not erasing your scars. He is using them as proof that you can be trusted with what is next. But hear this carefully, because it matters. A blessing you did not pay for must be carried with humility, or it will collapse under entitlement. You must remember where you were when you did not have it. You must remember the prayers that felt unanswered, the days that tested your resolve, the nights when faith was a decisive on rather than a feeling. Memory is a safeguard. It keeps the gift from becoming an idol. God's favor is not fragile, but the human heart is. That is why gratitude must be practiced, not assumed. Gratitude keeps the blessing in its proper place. It reminds you that what you hold is entrusted, not owned, that you are a steward, not a master, that the same God who gave can also redirect, reshape, or reassign according to his wisdom. There is also a responsibility to let the blessing change you, not just your circumstances, but your conduct. If God lifts you, let it make you gentler. If he expands you, let it make you more generous. If he honors you, let it make you more faithful. A blessing that only enlarges comfort but does not deepen character has missed its purpose. You may be tempted to explain the blessing away, to minimize it, to rationalize it, so that it fits neatly into your narrative of self-effort. Resist that temptation. Let grace remain grace. Let it unsettle you just enough to keep you dependent. For dependence is not weakness, it is alignment. It places you where guidance can be received and correction can be welcomed. There is a peculiar joy in knowing that your future is not entirely determined by your past, that mistakes, delays, and detours do not have veto power over divine intention. God does not consult your failures when deciding whether to move. He consults his purpose, and purpose, once spoken, is not easily revoked. If you are in a season where thing seems to be happening, do not assume nothing is being prepared. The roots of the tallest trees grow in darkness. Growth that is visible too soon is often shallow. God prefers depth over speed, stability over spectacle. And when the time is right, what has been forming beneath the surface will emerge with a strength that surprises even you. The blessing with your name on it will not arrive because you finally convinced God. It will arrive because you became ready to receive without trying to control, ready to hold without clutching, ready to walk forward without demanding guarantees. Faith matures when it learns to trust timing more than explanation. So remain attentive, not anxious but alert, not passive but patient. Continue to do what is right even when it feels unnoticed. Continue to grow even when it feels slow. Continue to believe even when evidence feels scarce. These are not wasted days. They are forming the kind of soul that can receive without being ruined by receiving. When it happens, you may find that the greatest gift is not the blessing itself, but what it reveals about God's character, that He is generous beyond fairness, that He is attentive beyond logic, that He is faithful beyond human consistency. And that realization will steady you for whatever comes next, because you will know that your life is not governed by chance, nor limited to what you can earn, but held within a purpose that unfolds step by step, season by season, often quiet, often unexpectedly, as God continues to write a story in which even the unearned moments carry meaning, and the blessings you never paid for become invitations to walk more carefully, love more deeply, and trust more fully as you step into what is still unfolding, and discover that this is not ending, but the opening of something that will require your courage, your obedience, and your willingness to keep moving forward, even when the path ahead is not yet fully visible, because faith was never meant to eliminate mystery, only to teach you how to walk within it while God continues to shape, refine, and prepare you for what lies just beyond the horizon, where purpose meets patience, and the next unfolding chapter begins to take form in ways you cannot yet predict, but are already being prepared to receive as your journey continues, and your understanding deepens, and your trust is tested in new ways that will require you to listen more closely, move more wisely, and remain open to the quiet ways God chooses to act when you least expect it, and when you are finally ready to recognize that what is coming will ask more of you than what has passed, and will require a heart that stays surrendered even as the blessing continues to grow and expand into areas of your life that are still being shaped and transformed as you walk forward into the unfolding purpose that has not yet fully revealed itself, and will continue to do so as long as you are willing to keep trusting and walking and waiting and becoming. And in that becoming, you will notice that God often reshapes your understanding of strength before He reshapes your circumstances. Strength, you discover, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward while fear still whispers. It is not the confidence that nothing will go wrong, but the trust that even if it does, you will not be abandoned in it. This is how maturity forms, not in moments of applause, but in the quiet decisions to remain faithful when there is no visible reward attached. There is a subtle education that happens in waiting. It teaches you how to listen, not just to God, but to your own motives. Waiting reveals whether you desire the blessing or the transformation. It exposes whether your prayers are rooted in purpose or in escape. Many people ask God to change their situation when what truly needs changing is their interpretation of it. God is less interested in rescuing you from every discomfort than He is in shaping you through it. And so, when the blessing finally approaches, it often finds you quieter than you once were, less demanding, less dramatic. You no longer insist that life prove itself to you. You have learned that meaning is not always loud, and that significance does not require spectacle. You have learned to recognize the sacred in ordinary moments, and that humility prepares you to handle extraordinary ones without losing your way. The unearned blessing carries with it a lesson about mercy. When you realize you did not earn it, you become less harsh with others who are still struggling. Judgment softens. Compassion deepens. You stop assuming that everyone's journey should mirror your own. Grace received makes grace visible. It changes the way you see people, not as competitors or obstacles, but as fellow travelers, each carrying unseen burdens, each navigating private battles. God often chooses to bless in ways that make pride uncomfortable. He gives in a manner that leaves no room for boasting, no platform for self-glorification. The blessing points back to Him, not to you. And this is not to diminish you, but to free you. A life driven by self-glory is exhausting. A life grounded in gratitude is sustainable. When you know the source of what you have, you are less anxious about losing it. There will be moments when you are tempted to rush ahead, to capitalize quickly on what God has given. But restraint is wisdom's companion. Not every open door must be sprinted through. Some require reverence. Some require patience, even after they open. God's pace does not always match your excitement, and learning to move at His speed protects you from misusing what you have been entrusted with. You may also notice that the blessing awakens new challenges. This surprises many people. They assume that favor removes difficulty, but often it simply relocates it. New responsibilities replace old struggles. New tests emerge where old ones once lived. This is not regression, it is progress. Science. Growth always introduces new forms of resistance. The key difference is that you now face them with greater clarity and deeper grounding. There is a humility that comes from realizing that you are not self-sustaining, that your breath, your opportunities, your connections, your timing, all of it rests beyond your full control. This realization does not weaken you, it steadies you. It anchors you in truth. It prevents you from mistaking momentum for mastery. God's blessings often reveal what truly matters to you. They illuminate priorities. They expose distractions. When something valuable is placed in your hands, you quickly learn what you are willing to protect and what you are willing to sacrifice. The blessing becomes a mirror, reflecting both your strengths and your unfinished work. This is not condemnation, it is guidance. And then there is the quiet realization that the blessing did not arrive to complete you. Completion was never its job. You were already whole in your humanity, already seen, already known. The blessing arrives to collaborate with your purpose, not to replace it. It enhances the path. It does not define your worth. God is careful with timing because timing shapes interpretation. A gift given too early can be misunderstood. A gift given too late can be resented, but a gift given at the right moment becomes revelation. Suddenly, past struggles make sense. Delays gain context. Losses find meaning. You see how each piece, even the painful ones, contributed to your readiness. There is a responsibility to remain teachable after receiving. Success can make people deaf. Comfort can dull curiosity. But a heart that stays open continues to grow. God does not stop speaking once He blesses. He often speaks more quietly, trusting that you have learned how to listen without being forced. You may find that your prayers change. They become less about asking and more about aligning. Less about outcomes and more about wisdom. You stop demanding signs and start seeking understanding. This is the shift from desperation to partnership, from pleading to trust. The blessing also clarifies your values. You become more selective. Not everything deserves your energy anymore. Not every invitation is worth accepting. Discernment sharpens when you realize that time and attention are also sacred resources. God's gifts teach you how to say no with peace, not guilt, and still, even in the midst of favor, there will be moments of uncertainty. Faith does not eliminate questions, it reframes them. Instead of asking, "What if this fails?" you begin to ask, "What is being asked of me now?" The focus shifts from fear to responsibility, from outcome to obedience. God's generosity is not careless. It is precise. It lands where it can be cultivated. It flows where it will not be wasted. And when it reaches you, it is because something in you has been prepared to hold it without being consumed by it. You may recall the version of yourself who once begged for relief, who once questioned whether endurance was worth the cost. That version did not know what was being formed, did not see the invisible architecture taking shape. Looking back, you will understand that survival was not the goal, formation was. There is also a quiet warning embedded in every blessing. Remember the source, not as a rule but as a relationship. Gratitude keeps the channel open. Humility keeps the vision clear. Forgetting does not remove the blessing immediately, but it slowly drains its meaning. God's intention is not to impress you with His power, but to invite you into trust. Power displayed without relationship creates fear. Power shared within relationship creates peace. When you know the heart behind the gift, you are less anxious about the future. You are not late. You are not overlooked. You are not forgotten. The pace of preparation often feels like delay to the impatient heart, but nothing essential has been wasted. Every season has contributed something necessary. Even confusion has its role. It strips away false certainty so that true faith can emerge as the blessing continues. As to unfold, you may realize that it is not a single moment, but a process. It grows. It evolves. It demands adaptation. God does not always give the full picture at once, not to tease you, but to keep you dependent on daily guidance. Clarity unfolds as obedience continues, and perhaps the most surprising truth of all is this: the blessing does not exempt you from humility. It requires it. You walk differently now, aware that much has been entrusted to you. You speak more carefully. You choose more intentionally. You understand that influence, however small, is never neutral. There will be days when you feel unqualified again. Do not panic. That feeling is not a sign of regression, it is a reminder of reliance. God often allows a measure of holy discomfort to keep you anchored in Him, rather than in your achievements. Your story is still being written. What you have received is not the final chapter, but a turning point, a hinge on which future decisions will swing. How you carry this blessing will shape what follows, so stay attentive, stay grounded, stay grateful. Continue to do the unseen work of character, even when visibility increases. Continue to listen even when noise grows louder. Continue to trust even when understanding lags behind experience. God does not rush endings, He unfolds purposes, slowly, intentionally, with care. And as you move forward, holding what you did not pay for, you will discover that the greatest gift is not what has been placed in your hand, but what has been formed in your heart. And that formation is still ongoing, still deepening, still refining you for what lies ahead as you continue walking into a future that remains partially hidden but steadily guided, where faith and responsibility walk side by side, and the blessing continues to reveal layers of meaning that you could not have understood earlier and will continue to do so as long as you remain willing to grow, to listen, to wait, and to walk forward in whatever God chooses to unfold next. And as you walk further into this unfolding, you may notice that God's way of shaping you becomes more inward than outward. The world may see movement, progress, and apparent success, but the deeper work continues quietly, where applause cannot reach. God has always preferred the interior life as the true place of transformation. Circumstances change quickly, character does not. And it is character that determines whether a blessing becomes a shelter or a burden. There is something sobering about realizing that God trusts you enough to give without demanding proof of perfection. Trust, when given, carries its own weight. It calls you to rise rather than relax. You begin to sense that every decision now echoes a little louder, that your choices ripple beyond yourself in ways they once did not. This is not pressure meant to crush you. It is awareness meant to guide you. You start to understand that blessings are not merely answers to prayer, but invitations to responsibility. They ask you to participate in something larger than personal comfort. They invite you to align your actions with a purpose that existed before you were aware of it. God does not hand you something precious so you can admire it endlessly. He places it in your care so it can be used wisely. At times you may feel a strange mixture of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for what has been given, fear of mishandling it. This tension is not unhealthy. It keeps you attentive. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you that reverence and joy are not opposites but companions. A heart that reveres God does not tremble in terror. It stands in awe. You may also notice how silence begins to feel different. It no longer feels empty or accusing. It feels full, expectant. You have learned that God often works most decisively in moments when nothing seems to be happening. Silence becomes a place of listening rather than a space of anxiety. You no longer rush to fill it with noise or explanations. The blessing you did not pay for teaches you something about freedom. True freedom is not the absence of limits, but the presence of alignment. When your life begins to align with its deeper purpose, many former desires lose their urgency. You no longer chase every possibility because you recognize that not all opportunities are assignments. Discernment becomes more valuable than ambition. There will be moments when old habits attempt to return, whispering familiar fears. You may catch yours. Trying to control outcomes again, trying to secure what was never meant to be secured by force. When this happens, pause. Remember how the blessing arrived. Remember that it came without coercion, without desperation, without manipulation. Let that memory recalibrate you. God's work in you has always been patient. He is not anxious about your growth. He does not hurry you through lessons just to reach a destination. The journey itself is part of the purpose. Each step teaches you something that cannot be learned any other way. Even now, with favor evident, the process continues. You may begin to see how earlier disappointment protected you from paths that would have cost you more than you were prepared to pay. Some doors that never opened were acts of mercy. Some rejections were redirection. With hindsight, what once felt like loss reveals itself as guidance. The blessing also refines your sense of identity. You no longer define yourself solely by what you achieve or possess. You become less fragile because your worth is no longer tied to performance. This stability allows you to engage the world without being consumed by it. You can give without depleting yourself because you are no longer drawing from insecurity. God often allows the blessing to stretch you socially as well. New relationships emerge. Old ones may change or fade. This can feel unsettling, but it is often necessary. Growth requires environments that can support it. Not everyone who walked with you in earlier seasons is meant to walk with you now. And this is not betrayal, it is transition. You learn to release people with gratitude rather than resentment. You recognize that each connection served a purpose at a particular time. Letting go becomes an act of trust rather than loss. God is not subtracting from your life. He is making room. As the blessing continues to unfold, you may realize that God's timing does not eliminate effort, it sanctifies it. You still work, you still plan, you still prepare, but you no longer operate from panic. Your labor becomes an expression of stewardship rather than self-justification. You work because you are called, not because you are afraid of being left behind. There is also a growing awareness of how fragile human plans can be. This awareness does not paralyze you, it humbles you. You hold your plans with open hands. You make room for redirection. Flexibility becomes a form of faith. You begin to understand that faith is not certainty about outcomes, but confidence in guidance. You may not know where every step leads, but you trust that each step is being overseen. This trust frees you from the need to control every detail. It allows you to be present rather than perpetually anxious about the future. God's blessing does not erase vulnerability, it redefines it. You become vulnerable not because you are weak, but because you are honest. You no longer pretend to have everything figured out. You no longer hide behind appearances. Authenticity becomes possible when worth is secure. There will be moments when the blessing challenges your values. Opportunities may arise that promise growth at the cost of integrity. This is a test, not a reward. God's favor never requires compromise. What is truly aligned will not demand that you betray what formed you. You may feel a stronger pull towards solitude at times. Not isolation, but intentional quiet. This is where recalibration happens. This is where gratitude is renewed and perspective is restored. Solitude becomes less about escape and more about alignment. The blessing you did not pay for also sharpens your awareness of injustice, of disparity, of suffering. You cannot remain indifferent once you recognize how much you have received freely. Compassion is not optional. It is the natural response of a heart that understands grace. You begin to ask different questions. Not how much can I keep, but how can this serve? Not how can I protect this, but how can I steward this well? These questions signal maturity. They reflect a shift from ownership to responsibility. God's generosity teaches you that abundance is not always material. It often shows up as clarity, peace, resilience, or wisdom. These forms of abundance sustain you even when circumstances fluctuate. They become anchors in uncertain seasons. You may notice that your tolerance for trivial conflict decreases. Petty arguments lose their appeal. Drama feels exhausting rather than entertaining. You value peace more deeply because you understand its cost. This does not mean you avoid difficult conversations. It means you approach them with intention rather than ego. As the days unfold, you begin to recognize how deeply interconnected things are. A decision made months ago suddenly bears fruit. A conversation once forgotten becomes significant. God's economy wastes nothing. Everything is woven into a larger pattern. You also realize that gratitude is not a feeling that arrives automatically. It is a practice that must be maintained. Some days it flows easily. Other days it requires intention. But it always reorients the heart toward truth. There may be seasons when the blessing feels quiet again, almost hidden. Do not mistake this for withdrawal. God often allows what He gives to settle, to integrate, to mature. Growth does not always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like deepening. You continue learning that obedience is not about blind compliance, but about trustful responsiveness. God invites you into dialogue, not domination. He guides rather than coerces. Listening becomes as important as acting. The more you walk in this awareness, the more you understand that God's greatest work is not in changing what you have, but in shaping how you hold it. Possession without wisdom leads to fear. Wisdom without possession leads to frustration. But when both meet, there is peace. Your past no longer defines you, but it informs you. Your mistakes become teachers rather than accusers. You carry them lightly, aware that they contributed to your discernment. Shame loses its authority when purpose takes its place. The blessing continues to reveal layers of meaning as you grow into it. What once felt like an end reveals itself as a beginning. What once felt like arrival becomes preparation for something deeper. God does not waste moments. He builds upon them, and so you move forward not with certainty about every outcome, but with trust in the one who oversees the process. You learn to walk with humility, aware that what you carry was given freely. You learn to walk with courage, aware that what is entrusted to you requires action. You learn to walk with patience, aware that unfolding takes time. The path ahead remains partially unseen, not because it is unsafe, but because faith grows in steps, not leaps. God reveals just enough to keep you moving, just enough to keep you dependent, just enough to keep you aligned. And as you continue walking, the blessing continues to shape you, not as a trophy to display, but as a calling to live more intentionally, more attentively, more faithfully, as the journey stretches onward, and the deeper purpose behind what you have received continues to emerge slowly, quietly, and persistently, inviting you to keep listening, keep learning, keep trusting, and keep moving forward into what has not yet been fully revealed but is already being prepared. So let this truth settle gently but firmly in your spirit. What God is placing upon your life is not an accident, not a reward system malfunction, and not a delayed payment suddenly released. It is intention arriving on time. It is grace stepping into history with your name written on it. You were not overlooked in the waiting, and you were not forgotten in the silence. You were being formed for weight, prepared for responsibility, and aligned for purpose. Carry what is coming with humility, because you know you did not earn it. Carry it with courage, because you are trusted with it. Carry it with wisdom, because it will shape more than just your own life. And as you move forward, remember this: the blessing was never meant to end the journey, only to mark a turning point where faith deepens, character steadies, and your life becomes a living testimony that God's timing is precise, His gifts are purposeful, and what He places in your hands is always meant to draw you closer to who you were created to become.